Are following a hearing inside this Orlando, Florida courtroom. It wrapped up, in fact, just a few moments ago. Joel Greenberg, former Florida tax official and associate of Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, was in that courtroom. According to court filings, he pled guilty to 6 federal charges, plans to cooperate with federal investigators. A criminal case involving Greenberg has led to a sex trafficking investigation of Congressman Gaetz. Gaetz has not been charged with a crime so far. He has repeatedly denied wrongdoing. That's where we start. NBC's Kerry Sanders is outside that Orlando, Florida courthouse. I also want to bring in Glenn Kirchner, MSNBC legal analyst, a former federal prosecutor. Glenn, I'll come to you in a moment. Kerry, let's start with you. Joel Greenberg, this former associate of Congressman Gaetz. What happened inside that courtroom? I understand that you were there.
Yeah, I just stepped out. We had an overflow courtroom for the news media because of social distancing. About 25 journalists there watching on a monitor. Joel Greenberg initially arrived standing as the judge, the magistrates arrived. He was in a blue jumpsuit, his hands shackled around to his, not only his handcuffs, but also to his waist with a chain around his waist. For about an hour, they went through the details of this plea agreement, and he said yes or I do to everything that the magistrate said. The one that, of course, is perhaps getting the most attention here is that he agreed that he would plead to the count of sex trafficking of a child, a 17-year-old. Now, the reason all of this is important, you sort of laid out, is because of the parties that were put together allegedly included Representative Matt Gaetz. And Representative Matt Gaetz, who has denied any involvement with any underage women, may be linked in some form or another to payments. Certainly in the agreement here, we know that there were payments made for services provided that were all set up on a website. But in the plea agreement, it's important to note that, and this is where the key is, that the defendant agrees to cooperate fully with the United States in the investigation and prosecution of other persons and to testify, which is another way of saying that he has already started to sing, and he is telling the prosecutors everything that he can as part of this plea agreement. And so if there is a connection that he can share that goes to Representative Matt Gaetz, the investigators will have full access to everything he knows. Just a short time ago, sort of adding to the atmosphere of the circus-like attention to the Matt Gaetz case, a banner plane was flying overhead that said, "TikTok Matt Gaetz." We expect to hear from Joel Greenberg's attorney in a little bit. He has some other business to attend to inside the courthouse, so he will not be down to talk on behalf of Joel Greenberg. And then, of course, as you noted at the top here, again this weekend, Matt Gaetz has said that he has done absolutely nothing wrong and has broken no laws. Craig?
All right. Kerry, stand by for me. I know we're trying to get in some of these sketches as well from the courtroom as well. Glenn, let me turn to you here for a moment, because in this court filing of Greenberg's plea agreement, he agrees to, as Kerry noted there, quote, cooperate fully with the United States in the investigation and prosecution of other persons and to testify. So, Glenn, as a former federal prosecutor, talk to me a little bit about the work that goes into getting one of these plea agreements done and how prosecutors could potentially rely on someone in Greenberg's position.
Yeah, Craig, well, first, let me say in my 30 years as a prosecutor, I never did draft or execute an 86-page plea agreement. They typically run about 8, 10, 12 pages. So I've spent a lot of quality time with these 86 pages here. And, you know, what we see are 60 of the 86 pages are what I would call receipts, hard corroboration of the crimes of not only Joel Greenberg, but the crimes of others. Now, those others are not yet identified, and that's exactly what I would expect, because the federal prosecutors don't want to tip their hand until they have indictments, arrest warrants, and we're starting to see arrest photos and perp walks, quite frankly. But, you know, the 60 pages of corroborating evidence contained in this plea and cooperation agreement really spell out some troubling crimes. And I think one of the most ominous features of this plea agreement, Craig, is that the last of the 6 charges Joel Greenberg just pleaded guilty to is a charge for a conspiracy to commit offenses against the United States. What does that tell us? Well, of necessity, A conspiracy means you have co-conspirators, because that is a requirement under the law of conspiracy, that you agreed with one or more persons to commit crimes against the United States, and you took one step toward the commission of those crimes, what we call an overt act. So we already know by virtue of this plea, there are co-conspirators who are likely to be indicted, held accountable. We just don't quite yet know who they are.
The documents that we're talking about, Glenn, again, they do not mention, as you point out, they do not mention Congressman Gaetz by name. The congressman from Florida has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. He has not been charged with a crime. What should we take away from that, Glenn, if anything?
We should take away from that the prosecutors are getting all of their sort of criminal law ducks in order. They want to make sure that if they are going to charge a sitting member of Congress, they want an extremely strong case. And the one thing nobody wants to go into court with is the word of Joel Greenberg standing alone. When you survey the crimes he has admitted to and the other 26 criminal offenses that are being dropped, or 27 criminal offenses that are being dropped by the prosecutors as part of this plea agreement, you know, if I'm ever going to put a guy like Joel Greenberg on the stand, I am going to make sure I can corroborate him with hard evidence, with receipts, every which way, rather than ever asking a jury to rely on his word standing alone.
And as we were having this conversation, we just got this sketch in from the courtroom, again, just a few moments ago. Joel Greenberg, former associate of Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, in court, pled guilty a short time ago. Glenn, thank you. It sounds like we should learn a bit more here in the days and weeks ahead. We'll be spending some more time with you. Glenn Kirschner.